I think that the both of you together really bring this incredible combination of both being on the ground, but your advanced open source investigation techniques and skills that you have, your Persian language skills, the Farsi language skills, your ability to really know the local context, and the two of you writing together, I think, really brings forward incredible sorts moments of history. I mean, we're gonna in a little bit we're gonna talk about your own grandmother and some of the artifacts that allowed you to look back at your own history and the women's movement and women's movements in Iran over time. But let's start with some of your reporting, Nilu, when it comes to using some of these open source tools like these. A lot of the journalists that are watching this right now are those who might see protests break out, whether that's in Iran or elsewhere, and they might find videos or they might find evidence of whatever it is that's unfolding and happening. And you are in this unique position in which, Iran, I'd love for you to talk more about this, but the ways in which it's a closed environment, as evidenced even just by your saying Fatme, like had to go underground, she gets there. Like journalists are operating under all of these different kinds of obstacles, interrogation, threats, imprisonment, and yet here you are taking into account what you're seeing online. Can you talk a little bit about the verification, the sort of approach you made to categorizing what you were seeing, and sort of trying to distill this into your reporting?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, for me, I find open source reporting to be the way to do accountability work in Iran because it is so, even if we were on the ground, say, when you come in as a foreign crew, you have a minder, someone is with you, you can't really report as freely as you might want. You might put people in danger as well, reporting that way. And as well, the Washington Post, we haven't had a correspondent based in Iran since my colleague Jason Rezaian was in prison, right? So it becomes really difficult to do this type of work. And my colleagues, my Iranian journalist friends who do work in Iran, I mean, they are under so much pressure. I had a friend of mine get detained and interrogated because after the former president Raisi was killed in a helicopter, they tweeted, "This person is not a martyr." That's it, and that is what got them, in trouble. So just kind of setting the stage for how difficult it is to do reporting there. And so with it in Iran, people are extremely internet savvy because media there are great reporters doing great work, but it's really difficult. And so the way that people are communicating with the outside world is social media, right? So they're posting videos on Twitter. This has very much become the thing since the 2009 protest movement in Iran, where kind of the first views we were seeing of state violence were videos that people were uploading. And so that first couple weeks, of the uprising, my feeds were just flooded. Most Iranians will share things on Telegram. I got to know Telegram channel administrators to understand more about how they were getting video. People were posting on Twitter, repost accounts. And so, we wanted to try to communicate to our audience what was going on beyond just here's a video of just blanket state violence. And so the first thing we did was verify as many videos that we could and see if there was a theme in between them. So that was the first report that I did with Haley Willis, and she is an angel.
Yeah,
Yes,
I can attest.
a friend of OPC. Yeah, so her and I worked together and we distilled out the first visuals that we were seeing in a few categories: attacking symbols of the state, women in the lead. So things like women directly confronting security forces with their bodies, putting that on the line. That was the first time we had seen this. Women cutting their hair, which became a symbol. And as well, seeing how widespread these protests were. Those are the largest and widespread protests in the Islamic Republic's history. So you're seeing it in Tehran. You're hearing Kurdish chants in Tehran. Tehran is not a Kurdish city. So to hear that, you were really understanding the solidarity that people were having with Jina. And we were seeing protests in Mashhad, in Qom, in traditionally, pro-regime stronghold conservative cities, and then in small islands like Quiche. So really just being able to show the expanse of that was important to us. Um, and for us, I mean, our main, we do all the video verifications, making sure it's of the current moment. And this is really when Persian language comes into play because people were protesting in urban environments. Most often I could read a street sign and then that would give us, our window in to verify quite quickly.
Amazing. One of the things that I think you talk about in the book is the verification methods for, I believe it was, whether or not authorities were detaining protesters in ambulances, which, is obviously the misuse of an ambulance. If true, talk a little bit about how you approach that. How do you verify something like that?
Yeah, so this is something that I had heard from people protesting, and it wasn't until no, late October, early November that we've started to see visuals showing that. So a key video that we saw was an ambulance that was stopped, and behind them there was someone filming, and the ambulance was stopped, and the person filming started to say, they have someone in there, like let her go, right? So we're watching that, and the ambulance stops. We don't see the person run out, but we see the ambulance driver, and he is not in the traditional ambulance uniform. And again, these are grainy videos that we're working with. And so we're trying to, be able to see, can we say what unit he was in or this, but it was just clear this person was not in the ambulance uniform, and he had what looked like a holster for a firearm. And that's not traditionally what an ambulance worker would have. We saw other pieces of evidence, visual evidence too, like seeing ambulances outside of police stations. And so from after we had those pieces of visual evidence, we filled it in with eyewitness accounts. So I interviewed several doctors in Iran just to get an understanding, like, would there be ambulances at a police station anyways? Is there any reason for that? And they said no. And then I interviewed protesters who saw ambulances in the middle of protests at Sharif University. One protester I talked to said, we saw the ambulance come, out came plainclothes Basij, and they beat one of my friends and threw him in the ambulance and drove off. And, it really shows like all the different apparatus of the state working together, even something that isn't traditionally for law enforcement. And one protester said to me, we used to be so scared when we saw police, and now our biggest fear is this ambulance. Like, are they going to help us or are they going to arrest us? And once I shared the story with Jason, my colleague at the Post, he said, "Oh, well, yeah, I remember when I was, imprisoned, they used to shuttle me in ambulances to go to the court." So that's a detail that came out after. And yeah, it was again like we really have everything, all of our reporting to thank of everyone in Iran that uploaded those videos and images because we wouldn't be able to do this work without that.
Absolutely. And I think there's also you write about the fear of this content disappearing, being removed, threats to people. Can you talk a little bit about how you preserved it or archived it for the purposes of this work?
Yeah, I mean, every video that we wanted to, every time we would see a video that we thought, okay, this is a central piece of evidence, we would download it immediately because again, we didn't know what the shelf life was. There was a Twitter account that was very prolific in that time, Tasvir 1500, I believe, that's completely offline. And this was a reposting account. So
Yeah.
making sure just to download and archive every piece of video. And as well, I think this is where source relationships come really into handy because there's three or four different prominent citizen journalist Telegram accounts in Iran that have 400,000, 500,000 subscribers on their channels. And these accounts, they will get videos sent to them, and then they will disseminate it. And so every time I wanted to use something, I would go to one of the channel admins and I would say, did you post this? And try to get more info. The thing that's difficult with doing this work in Iran is I've never been able to get the metadata on anything. And that's because, the Islamic Republic is so good at surveillance that people that want to upload videos and images, they have to think about their security. And most Iranians already have a VPN just because Instagram, Facebook's already blocked. So for regular things like going on social media, they have that. And so, using having engagement with these Telegram channel admins is really helpful because someone will sometimes make a dummy account that's just like has nothing to do with them, send the evidence, and then they'll close their account and leave. So, like almost never I could get to the original uploader in that moment.
Wow. And a little bit about like, you're talking to people to help verify things, eyewitnesses and others. Talk about, given the level of surveillance and digital surveillance and safety for people, talk a little bit about some of the techniques, secure messaging platforms and other ways in which you work to keep people safe that you were talking to.
Yeah, I mean, safety is my number one concern, especially when I am especially when it's a sensitive moment. Like you just know that the surveillance is being kicked up an extra notch in times of national unrest. So for me, I mean, the nice thing is Iranians are already on encrypted apps. Like I have a family WhatsApp. Like that's how everyone communicates, so that feels nice. But once it's a little bit more delicate, I will, Telegram use secret chats, I'll do disappearing messages, kind of adding in an extra layer of safety. And then as well, I try to limit my interaction as much as I can, which is really hard because I feel like as reporters, we don't want to let that connection go. But it's really about trying to get the few key things that I need from this person and making sure that what we're reporting is accurate. And any other double checks, like let me double check this location, instead of asking an eyewitness who was there, I will, ask other people outside of the country, can you double check this signage with me? Just because I want to minimize their risk as much as possible.
Yeah. It's so important. But I want to continue with this, but I want to step back for a moment and just get a sense of, because I know there's so many journalists who want to learn OSINT techniques. They want to learn how to verify, um, videos and content that they're seeing online, especially in an era where, like it's really hard sometimes to navigate this. What tips or advice would you have for young people that want to learn how to do these skills? And also, can you talk about how you got into this work yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I started working with, learning about open source reporting while I was at the Times. So I was a video reporter. I would do a lot of field work, breaking news work. And the visual investigations team at the Times is wonderful. And so I loved what they were doing. And so I would just learn alongside with that team. So the first story that I did was a look into um, police using, what was it, less lethal munitions at a protest in Chile. And so that's kind of how I started, and I learned video verification from my colleagues and things like that. But that's where, that journey first started. And then I learned everything else through trainings. I did a Bellingcat training a couple years ago. This May, I did a training with Berkeley at The Hague, which was very cool. So there are all these opportunities to do those trainings. And as well, like I love YouTube. Bendo Brown on YouTube, his series is great. So these tools are really accessible, which is really nice. And I like doing trainings often because you'll learn new things. Like in this last training we did, we learned about using, ChatGPT to write scripts to make, geolocation a little bit easier. So it's exciting that this field continues to change and shift.